Doctor's daughter never took a step until a homeless black boy whispered, "Trust me. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about." My name is Emily Carter, and I grew up in Boston as the only child of Dr. Richard Carter, a man everyone in the city admired. He was a skilled surgeon, respected, and feared in some ways too. To the world, my family looked perfect. We lived in a big house, had drivers, and everything anyone could want. But behind the closed doors of that house, things were very different for me. I was born with a condition that left me unable to walk. My legs never worked the way other kids did, and from the moment I was old enough to understand, I felt like I was less. My parents never let me forget it. My mother, Karen, was gentle in public, but at home she treated me like porcelain. She reminded me constantly that I was lucky to even be alive, lucky to have all the care my father could afford. She thought she was protecting me, but her words made me feel like a burden. My father, on the other hand, was cold. To him, my condition was an embarrassment he wanted hidden. He wanted control over every part of my life, from who I spoke to where I went, to how I presented myself. He hired private tutors, arranged everything so I never had to step outside of the bubble he built. I often watched the world from behind glass, from the windows of our car or from my room. I longed to know what it was like to just walk down the street, to feel independent, to have a friend who didn't look at me with pity. But no one outside my family ever got close. Every time someone tried, my father found a way to push them away. He wanted me dependent on him forever, and he never said it, but I knew he believed I would never be strong enough to stand on my own. Even with all the care, all the money, and all the medical help my father could pay for, I felt trapped. My body was weak, but worse than that, my spirit was crushed. The world saw me as the spoiled daughter of a famous doctor. Inside, I felt invisible. I started believing that maybe this was all my life would ever be, sitting in a chair, waiting for people to push me where they wanted me to go. Then, on a rainy afternoon that seemed like every other, something happened that I never expected. That was the day I met Marcus, a boy who had nothing. He didn't have money, he didn't have a home, but he had something my parents never gave me. He had faith in me, and with just 2 words, "Trust me," my life began to change in ways I couldn't imagine. My father, Dr. Richard Carter, had a reputation in Boston that everyone admired. People said he saved lives, that he was brilliant, that he deserved all the praise he received. In public, he smiled, shook hands, and looked like the picture of success. At home, though, he was someone else entirely. His voice was sharp, his rules unshakable. He believed everything had to be controlled, and that included me. He never raised his hand against me, but his words carried the weight of chains. If I asked for something outside his plan, his eyes grew cold, and I knew the answer was no. My mother, Karen, was softer in her approach, but her words cut in their own way. She constantly reminded me of how fortunate I was to be cared for, how many children would give anything to have the kind of life I did. She never realized that those reminders only deepened the ache inside me. I wasn't ungrateful, but gratitude was not enough to replace the freedom I longed for. Every time she said, "You're lucky, Emily," it felt less like comfort and more like a warning to never complain, never expect more. My days followed the same routine. Tutors came in the morning, carefully chosen by my father. They weren't allowed to speak to me beyond the lessons. Meals were strict, timed, and controlled. Even the books I read were chosen for me, as if my thoughts themselves had to be managed. My mother fussed over my clothes, making sure I always looked polished, even if I was only sitting in the living room. Everything about me had to reflect the image my father wanted. To them, I was not just a daughter, but a symbol of their world, a symbol they had to keep polished and under control. When I looked outside, I saw kids my age walking freely on the sidewalks, laughing, pushing each other, running with energy I couldn't imagine. I wished I could join them, but my father's driver would shut the tinted windows before I could stare too long. Even at parties, where children of his colleagues came, I was placed in a quiet corner, introduced politely, and then ignored. My chair separated me from everyone else, and no one dared cross the invisible line my father had drawn around me. What hurt most wasn't just that I couldn't walk, it was that I wasn't allowed to live. My father believed keeping me sheltered was the same as keeping me safe, but safety without freedom felt like a cage. I had no say in what I did, where I went, or who I spoke to. Even my smile, when it appeared, felt rehearsed, like I was performing the role of a perfect daughter in his perfect family. Inside, I was restless. I wanted to feel what it was like to be a person, not a project. I wanted someone who saw me, not just the chair I sat in or the family name attached to me. I didn't know when or how, but deep down, I held on to a quiet hope that one day something, or someone, would break me out of that cage. It was one of those gray afternoons when the rain never seemed to stop. My driver had taken me to a small bookstore downtown because my father wanted me to pick up some medical journals for him. I sat in my chair near the entrance while he went inside. The sound of cars splashing through puddles filled the street, and the smell of wet asphalt drifted through the air. I pulled my jacket tighter, wishing the minutes would pass faster. That's when I noticed him. A boy, maybe a little older than me, walked slowly along the sidewalk. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his thin frame, and his sneakers were worn down, the soles nearly falling apart. He didn't look like anyone I was used to seeing. Most kids I came across were polished, dressed neatly, the kind of children my parents approved of. This boy looked like he had been fighting a battle with the world every single day. He stopped when he saw me. Most people, when they noticed me, either looked away quickly or gave me that sad smile I had grown to hate. But not him. He looked right at me. Not at the chair, not at my legs, but at me. His eyes held something steady, almost defiant, as if he saw past everything my parents and the world used to define me. He stepped closer, his footsteps light even though the rain hit hard around us. For a second, I thought my driver would come out and chase him away. But the boy didn't care. He leaned down slightly, close enough that his voice could cut through the sound of the rain. "Trust me, you're stronger than you think," he whispered. Those words sank into me like nothing I'd ever heard before. People had told me to be positive, to be grateful, to be patient. But no one had ever told me I was strong. Strength wasn't a word people used when they talked about me. I was fragile, delicate, dependent. That was the story my family had written for me. But in that single moment, a stranger rewrote it with one sentence. Before I could reply, my driver returned, holding a plastic bag with books. He gave the boy a harsh look, one that said he didn't belong there. The boy didn't argue. He straightened up and stepped back, but his eyes stayed on mine, calm and steady. I couldn't explain why, but something inside me shifted. As the car pulled away, I twisted in my seat to catch one last glimpse of him. He didn't run after us. He just stood there in the rain, as if he had already given me the only thing I needed. I didn't even know his name yet, but I carried his words with me the whole ride home. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a fragile girl trapped in a chair. I felt like someone who might be capable of more. Marcus came back. At first, I thought that day in the rain would be the last time I saw him, but it wasn't. A week later, when my driver went inside a pharmacy to pick up medicine, I saw Marcus leaning casually against the wall, waiting as if he had known exactly where to find me. He smiled, not the polite kind people gave me, but the kind that felt real. From then on, he began appearing whenever he could, always in places where he knew my parents wouldn't be around. At first, I was nervous. My father would never allow it, and I knew if he discovered Marcus near me, he would make sure I never saw him again. But there was something about Marcus that felt safe, even though he lived in a world far harsher than mine. He didn't treat me like glass. He didn't speak to me like I was broken. He spoke like I was capable, like he expected more from me than anyone else ever had. One evening, he asked me to try something small. He placed his hand firmly on the arm of my chair and said, "Push up with me. Just a little." I hesitated, but his steady gaze kept me from backing out. My arms shook as I gripped the sides, my legs stiff and useless under me, but with his help, I rose an inch, then two. My whole body trembled, as if I had carried a weight too heavy to hold. Still, I felt something I had never felt before, my own strength. When I collapsed back into the chair, Marcus grinned. "See, alive. You just needed to wake it up." From that day, we started a routine. He would sneak in through the side gate when the household was quiet, usually in the evenings when my parents were out or too busy to notice. In the garden, hidden by tall hedges, he guided me through small exercises, lifting, stretching, balancing. My muscles screamed, but each night I went to bed with a fire in my chest I hadn't known was possible. The first time I stood for more than a few seconds, Marcus held my arms steady, and I felt my legs lock beneath me. They shook violently, but they held. I looked down at them, thin and weak, and for once they didn't feel like dead weight. They felt alive. I started to cry, but Marcus just said softly, "Don't cry. Own it. This is yours." It wasn't long before my father noticed something. One night at dinner, I shifted in my chair differently, reaching for a plate without struggling as much as I used to. His sharp eyes caught it instantly. He didn't say anything then, but I could feel his gaze on me like a shadow. He had built my whole life around the idea that I would never stand, never walk, never live beyond his control. The thought of me improving without him, with someone else's help, was something he would never allow. I didn't care. For the first time, I had a secret worth protecting. It happened on a night when everything seemed quiet. The sky was clear, the garden lights dim, and the house unusually calm. My parents had gone to a dinner event, and I thought I had time. Marcus slipped in through the side gate like always, his steps light and sure. We went to the back corner of the yard, hidden behind tall hedges. He held out his hands, and I gripped them tightly. My legs trembled as I tried to take slow, shaky steps forward. Every movement felt like a small victory. I was so focused on Marcus's voice, steady and encouraging, that I didn't notice the back door open. It wasn't until I heard the sharp intake of breath that my heart froze. My father stood there, his figure tall and rigid under the porch light. His eyes cut through the night like blades, and for a second, I wished the ground would swallow me whole. "What the hell is this?" His voice cracked the silence, making me stumble back into my chair. Marcus tried to steady me, but my father's fury was already rushing toward us. He stormed across the yard, his polished shoes crushing the grass. I had never seen him so angry. His face twisted with disgust as his eyes landed on Marcus. "Trash!" he spat, pointing at him like he was something crawling in the dirt. "You think you can sneak into my house? Touch my daughter? Corrupt her with your lies?" Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. I could feel the tension between them like fire in the air. I tried to speak, my voice trembling. "Dad, please, he was only helping." "Helping?" My father's words cut me off. "Do you even understand what you've done, Emily? Letting someone like him near you, in this house, on our property? Do you want to shame us?" His words weren't about me at all. They were about himself, about his pride. I turned toward the door, desperate for my mother to appear and calm him down. She came running out, her face pale. For a moment, I thought she might stand with me, defend me. But when my father barked at her, "Tell her this ends now," she lowered her head. "Emily," she whispered, "your father's right. This isn't safe. You can't see him again." Her words hit me harder than his rage. I had always believed, deep down, that if anyone in this house understood me, it would be her. But in that moment, she chose him. She chose his image, his rules, over me. My father grabbed my chair and spun it back toward the house. His grip was so tight on the handles I thought he might break them. "This ends tonight," he said through clenched teeth. "You will never see him again." As Marcus stood silently in the dark, I looked back at him, my chest heavy with the weight of betrayal. That night, I lost not just my father's trust, but my mother's too. The house grew quiet after that night, but it was not the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the kind that pressed on my chest and made it hard to breathe. My father never spoke Marcus's name again, as if by refusing to say it he could erase him completely. My mother avoided my eyes, moving through the house like a shadow, pretending nothing had happened. I waited by the garden each evening, hoping Marcus would come back the way he always did, slipping past the gate with that steady look in his eyes. But the gate stayed closed, and the night stretched long. 3 days passed before I finally asked. My father was reading in his study, the light from his desk lamp turning his face into sharp lines. My voice shook when I said, "Where is Marcus?" His eyes flicked up, cold and flat, and then he set his book aside. "I took care of it," he said simply. The words felt like ice down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing the words out, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "He won't be bothering you again," he replied, his tone calm, almost casual. "The boy was a problem, and problems don't belong here. I made some calls. He's where he belongs now." It wasn't until later that I overheard the truth from one of the servants. My father had bribed the police to pick Marcus up and send him to a juvenile shelter. He wasn't arrested for a crime, just labeled as a nuisance, another street kid swept out of sight. My father's money made it easy. To him, Marcus was not a person, he was an inconvenience. I locked myself in my room that night and cried until my throat burned. I thought of Marcus's worn shoes, his calm voice, the way he told me to trust him. He had given me hope when no one else had. And now he was gone, pushed away by the man who was supposed to care about me. My father didn't want me happy. He wanted me obedient. The betrayal from my mother cut even deeper. She didn't fight for me, didn't ask where Marcus had gone, didn't care enough to challenge my father. When I looked at her across the dinner table, she looked down at her plate, too afraid to meet my eyes. In her silence, she chose him again, just as she had that night in the garden. I realized then that my parents' love was not really love at all. It was control, wrapped in the shape of protection. They didn't see me as a person with dreams or feeling. To them, I was an extension of their image, something to keep polished and silent. But Marcus had seen me. Even if he was gone, even if I never found him again, he had left something behind inside me. His words echoed in my mind, steady and unshakable. "Trust me, you're stronger than you think." The house felt emptier without Marcus, but the emptiness did not crush me the way my father hoped it would. Instead, it hardened into something else: anger, resolve, rebellion. If my father thought he had destroyed the one person who believed in me, then he didn't understand what Marcus had really given me. He had left me with belief in myself, and that belief began to grow stronger every day. At night, when the house went silent and the halls stretched cold, I started moving in secret. At first, it was just pushing myself out of the chair and gripping the dresser for balance. My arms shook, my legs screamed with pain, but I refused to stop. Each time I managed to hold myself up, even for a few seconds, it felt like I was defying everything my father wanted me to be. I remembered Marcus's voice, steady and sure. "Trust me, you're stronger than you think." Those words repeated in my mind like a drumbeat. They carried me when my body begged to give up. I fell over and over, bruising my knees, my elbows, even cutting my palms on the floor. But I refused to cry out. I refused to let anyone hear me. Every fall became another reason to rise again. Soon, I began to take tiny steps along the edge of my bed, one hand clinging to the headboard, the other reaching out into the air. My legs shook so hard I thought they might snap, but they held. Each step was slow, painful, but it was a step. I marked my progress in silence, like keeping a secret diary that only my body could read. During the day, I played the role my parents expected. I sat quietly in my chair, moved when they pushed me, spoke when they wanted me to. They didn't notice the faint bruises on my arms from catching myself, or the exhaustion in my eyes from nights spent training alone. They were too wrapped up in their own world, too convinced I could never defy them. Weeks turned into months, and the small steps became longer ones. I practiced standing without holding on, wobbling like a child learning for the first time. I stretched muscles that had been asleep for years. My body ached constantly, but the pain was proof that I was alive, proof that I was not as weak as they made me believe. Sometimes late at night, I stood in front of the mirror, breathing hard, staring at my reflection. My hair clung to my face with sweat, my legs trembling beneath me. But there I was, standing. On my own. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was looking at myself, not the version my parents had created. I knew I couldn't show them yet. Not my father, not my mother. This was mine, and mine alone, until the day I chose to reveal it. And when that day came, it would not just be walking, it would be my answer to their betrayal. My 21st birthday was supposed to feel like freedom. For most people, it meant stepping into adulthood, making choices for themselves, finally being treated as equals. But for me, it became another reminder of how little control I had. My father planned everything, a massive gala at one of the most expensive hotels in Boston. Invitations were sent to surgeons, business leaders, politicians, anyone who could add to his reputation. It wasn't about celebrating me. It was about showing me off as a piece of his perfect picture. From the moment I arrived, I could feel the weight of it. The chandeliers sparkled, the music was soft, and every pair of eyes turned when I was wheeled in. My mother adjusted my dress, whispered to me to smile, and I did, because that was what they expected. But inside, I was boiling. Months of secret progress burned beneath the surface. Every step I had practiced alone made this performance in a chair feel like a lie I could no longer live with. As the night dragged on, I slipped away from the crowd, rolling down a quiet hallway lined with tall mirrors. I just wanted a moment to breathe. That's when I heard his voice. My father's laugh echoed from a side room. I stopped, hidden by the doorway, and listened. He was surrounded by colleagues, men in tailored suits with glasses of champagne in their hands. His tone was proud, arrogant, like a man showing off a prized possession. "Emily will always be dependent," he said with a smile. "She needs me, and that's the way it should be. If she ever stood on her own, she might actually think she could leave. Keeping her where she is safe, cared for, it ensures she stays in line." The words cut sharper than any knife. My stomach turned as my chest tightened. He wasn't just controlling me out of fear of the world. He wanted me weak. He wanted me trapped forever, not because of love, but because of power. To him, my condition wasn't a tragedy. It was his leverage. I pressed my hand to the wall to steady myself, fighting the urge to burst into the room and scream. My throat burned with rage, but I stayed silent. His laughter, his colleagues' nods, the clink of their glasses, it all told me the same truth. I had never been his daughter. I had been his tool, his display of control, his proof that he could bend even fate to his will. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel the same ache I used to when he reminded me of my weakness. Instead, I felt cold, steady, and certain. All those secret nights of struggle, every bruise, every trembling step, I knew then they had been leading to this. This was the breaking point. My father believed he had locked me in his cage forever, but he didn't know I already had the key. The music in the ballroom played softly, glasses clinked, and laughter echoed under the glittering chandeliers. I sat in my chair near the center, just as my father had positioned me, a polished part of his show. He stood a few feet away, speaking with pride to his guests, boasting about his career, his home, his perfect family. Every smile, every nod from the crowd fed his ego. But as I looked around the room filled with power and wealth, I knew the moment had come. My body trembled, not from weakness, but from the storm inside me. For years, I had been silent, trapped, obedient. Tonight, I would end it. I gripped the arms of the chair and pushed myself up. At first, the sound of the band and chatter covered me, but then someone near the front gasped. Heads began to turn. I rose higher, my legs unsteady but holding. For a second, the room froze, and then whispers rippled through the crowd. Step by step, I moved forward. My legs shook with the effort, but I didn't stop. Each movement felt like fire, but it was a fire I had built myself. Gasps filled the air as I crossed the polished floor, the click of my shoes echoing louder than the music. I saw faces pale, mouths open, eyes wide with disbelief. And then I saw him. My father's face turned white. His jaw clenched, his glass slipped slightly in his hand. He looked like the ground had been ripped from under him. He wanted me weak, wanted me dependent. But now the lie he had built was crumbling in front of everyone. When I reached the center of the room, I stopped, standing on my own, breathing hard but steady. My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every word. I wasn't supposed to walk, I said, my eyes on him. At least, that's what my father wanted you to believe. He wanted me dependent, trapped, and silent. The room stayed silent, all eyes on me. I went on. What he didn't tell you was that someone else believed in me. A boy with nothing, a boy he called trash, showed me I was stronger than I ever knew. He helped me take my first steps, and my father destroyed him for it. He bribed the police, had him thrown away, all to keep me weak. Whispers grew louder, people shifting uncomfortably. My father tried to speak, but I cut him off. He betrayed me. My own mother stood by him. But every night, when I was alone, I fought. Every painful step became my rebellion. And tonight, in front of you all, I want you to see the truth. I am standing here not because of him, but in spite of him. The silence that followed was heavier than the music that started the night. My father's mask had shattered, and there was no way to rebuild it. The gala ended in silence. People who had once admired my father avoided his eyes as they left the hall, whispering to each other, shaking their heads. No amount of money or charm could erase what they had just seen and heard. His reputation, built over decades, cracked in one night. The perfect doctor, the perfect father, the perfect family gone. At home, the walls felt colder than ever. My father didn't speak to me. His silence was heavy, not because he was ashamed of what he had done, but because I had exposed him. My mother tried to reach for me in small ways, but I pulled back. She had chosen his side when I needed her most. There was no forgiveness in me for that. I knew I couldn't stay. The house had never felt like home, but after the gala, it felt like a cage closing in on me again. With quiet determination, I packed my things, only what I could carry, and left without a backward glance. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them explanations. Walking out the front door on my own 2 feet was the final answer they would ever get from me. In the weeks that followed, the whispers grew louder. People who once respected my father began asking questions. Stories of his arrogance, his manipulation, his treatment of me leaked into the open. His colleagues stopped defending him. His patients looked elsewhere for care. The image he had guarded for so long had turned to dust. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. Every step I took, no matter how shaky, was proof of what I had fought for. Freedom, dignity, and the right to be more than what they tried to make me. Months later, fate gave me something I never thought I would find again. At a small community center on the edge of the city, I walked through the doors and saw him. Marcus. He was older, steadier, but his eyes hadn't changed. He was surrounded by kids, showing them how to box, how to stand strong, how to believe in themselves. When he saw me, his face lit up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I walked toward him, step by step, no chair, no chains, no fear. He didn't need to say anything. His smile said it all. As I stood there, watching him guide those children with the same faith he once gave me, one thought filled my heart. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones with power or wealth. They're the ones who believe in us when no one else does. And Marcus had believed in me. That belief had carried me here, standing on my own, free at last.